And now on the news in details, we begin with Africa. Sudan's Rapid Support Forces, RSF and allies have committed staggering levels of sexual abuse, raping civilians as troops advance and abducting some women as sex slaves during the more than 18-month war. A UN mission said on Tuesday. Victims have ranged between 8 and 75 years, said the UN fact-finding mission's report. With most sexual violence committed by the RSF and allied Arab militia in an attempt to terrorize and punish people for perceived links to enemies. The UN has documented a massive scale of sexual violence in Sudan, with the paramilitary RSF, which is fighting Sudan's army, accusing it of ethnic killings against the Masalit people with the help of Arab militias. The reports, based on interviews with victims, families and witnesses, echoed investigations by newsmen and rights groups. The RSF has roots in the Janjaweed militias, which helped the military crush a rebellion in Sudan's Western Darfur region 2 decades ago. The UN mission said racist laws against non-Arabs in parts of West Darfur state were widely used during sexual attacks, indicating ethnicity targeting. Reports also found that a West Darfur woman was held captive for over 8 months by RSF guards and impregnated by her main captor during repeated rapes. The report also found credible reports that both the army and RSF had committed major abuses like torture and arbitrary arrests. Sudan's war has created one of the world's worst humanitarian disasters, with thousands killed, more than 11 million uprooted, widespread hungers, and involvement of foreign forces. Dozen Egyptian migrants are feared dead after their boats capsized off the coast of the eastern Libyan town of Tobruk on Monday, two Egyptian security sources said, while one man was rescued from the shipwreck. The 13 men had set off for Italy in a people smuggler's boat on Sunday night, the sources said, citing information from the surviving man via Libyan authorities. The group, who hailed from Egypt's Al-Sharqiya and Al-Gabia provinces, were among a growing number of Egyptians attempting dangerous sea journeys toward Europe as the population struggles to deal with high inflation and unemployment. Democrats Kamala Harris warned tens of thousands of people gathered in Washington at her biggest rally that our Republican opponent Donald Trump was taking unchecked power as the tightening race for the presidency entered its final week. Harris spoke on Tuesday evening to an outdoor rally estimated by her campaign to number more than 75,000 people at the Sport near the White House, where on January 6, 2021, Trump addressed his supporters before they attacked the U.S. Capitol. Harris criticized Donald Trump for sending an armed mob to the U.S. Capitol to overturn his 2020 election loss. She described Trump as unstable, obsessed with revenge, consumed with grievance, and seeking unchecked power, highlighting his instability and desire for unchecked power before the November 5th election. More than 53 million Americans have already voted in the election, according to Election Hub at the University of Florida, in a battle that will decide who runs the world's richest and most powerful country for 4 years. Harris was flanked by American flags on stage and surrounded by blue and white banners that said "Freedom," with a well-lit White House behind her. The crowd included older people and college students, people from overseas, from New York and from nearby Virginia. Many women came in groups with other female friends. Thousands of his supporters stormed the Capitol, sending lawmakers fleeing for their lives after Trump's addresses on the ellipse. Whereas President in 2021, he told the crowd to fight like hell to prevent Congress from ratifying his loss. 4 people died in the ensuing riot at the Capitol, and 1 police officer who defended the Capitol died the following day. Trump has said that if re-elected, he would pardon the more than 1,500 participants who have been charged with crimes. U.S. Supreme Court denied on Tuesday a bid by former independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has endorsed Republican Donald Trump, to be removed from the ballot in Wisconsin and Michigan for the November 5th election. Kennedy has said he wants voters who would have backed him to cast ballots for Trump. The courts declined Kennedy's emergency request to order the Wisconsin Elections Commission and Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Henson to take him off the ballot in those states. Michigan and Wisconsin are among a handful of closely contested states expected to decide the outcome of the race between Trump and Democrats Kamala Harris. Conservative Justice Neil Gorsuch dissented from the decision concerning the Michigan ballots only. No other justice publicly dissented. Kennedy, an environmental lawyer and anti-vaccine activist known by his initials RFK, has sought the Supreme Court's intervention in his attempts to stay on the ballot in some states while dropping off others. In September, the Supreme Court rejected his bid to be restored to the ballot in New York. Kennedy suspended his campaign in August and endorsed the former president's candidacy. Kennedy has urged his supporters everywhere to back Trump and has withdrawn from the ballot in a number of Republican-leaning states. In his legal fight, Kennedy has argued that state officials are violating the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment's protection against government infringement of speech by forcing him to remain on the ballot after the sought to be removed. In Wisconsin, the Elections Commission refused to keep Kennedy off the ballot, noting that state laws does not allow for withdrawal once a nominee has qualified for the ballots as he had. The Wisconsin Supreme Court agreed in September with a trial court's decision against Kennedy, while Kennedy suggested that Wisconsin's officials cover his name with stickers on the ballots. The commission told the Supreme Court the absurdity of this proposal is evident on its face. Partial passwords to some parts of the state's voting systems that were accidentally posted online, polls no threats to November 5th general election. The Colorado Department of State said on Tuesday. The department said the spreadsheets located on its website improperly included a hidden tab, including partial passwords to certain components of Colorado voting systems. This does not pose an immediate security threat to Colorado's elections, nor will it impact how ballots are counted. It said the department said it took immediate action and informed the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. CISA spokesperson said the agency is aware of an incident involving over 600 passwords for voting systems in 63 of Colorado's 64 counties, which were shared on a website. The passwords were not encrypted and were posted since at least August. The Colorado Department of State stated that the state's election process includes many layers of security with 2 unique passwords for every election equipment component, kept in separate places and held by different parties. Passwords can only be used with physical in-person access to a voting system. The agency is in communication with the Colorado Secretary of State's Office for mitigation specifics. The name of the persons claiming to have access of passwords was blocked out. Prominent U.S. Democratic Senator on Tuesday called on the Biden administration to crack down on a popular duty-free customs program after newsmen reported how drug traffickers use the streamlined entry system to sneak Chinese-made fentanyl chemicals into the country virtually unchecked. In a letter addressed to Treasury Secretary Jan Indian Minister of Home Affairs Amit Shah, a close ally of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, was behind the plots to target Sikh separatists on Canadian soil. Indian government did not immediately respond but has dismissed Canada's prior accusations as baseless, denying any involvement. The Washington Post newspaper first reported that Canadian officials alleged Shah, considered the number 2 in the Modi government, was behind the campaign of violence and intimidation targeting Sikh separatists in Canada. Canadian Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister David Morrison said to a parliamentary panel on Tuesday that he told the US-based newspaper that Shah was behind the plots. The journalist called him and asked if Shah was that person. I confirmed it was that person, Morrison told the committee, without providing further details or evidence. The High Commission of India in Ottawa and the Indian Foreign Ministry had no immediate comment. India has accused Canada of allegedly targeting Sikh separatists in October 2023, leading to queries being directed to the Foreign Ministry. The information is considered weak and flimsy by New Delhi, who does not expect it to cause trouble for Shah or the government. India has called Sikh separatists a terrorist and threats to its security and has ordered the expulsion of Indian diplomats in Canada. The allegations have tested Washington and Ottawa's relations with India, often seen as a counterbalance to China. Leader of a Canadian opposition party said on Tuesday that he was working to topple Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, but to do so he needs the help of other legislators who have shown little enthusiasm for the idea. The comments by Bloc Québécois Chief Yves Francois Blanchet underlined the challenges facing Trudeau's minority Liberal government, which is suffering from voter fatigue after 9 years and needs the support of other parliamentarians to stay in power. In return for backing Trudeau, the Bloc wanted more money for seniors and a promise to protect a system of tariffs and quotas that protects dairy farmers, many of whom live in Quebec. Blanchard said Trudeau had not acted in time. We are negotiating with opposition parties in order to have the government fall, he told reporters. To succeed, Blanchet must win over the smaller left-leaning New Democratic Party NDP, which in the last 5 weeks backed Trudeau in confidence votes. The Bloc, which is the second largest of the 4 opposition parties, seeks independence for the province of Quebec. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is due to speak to reporters later on Tuesday. Polls show both the NDP and Liberals would perform poorly in an election that must be held by the end of October 2025. Surveys of public opinion regularly show the official opposition Conservatives are on track for a big win. Incumbent Premier David Abbey's New Democratic Party NDP is set to form the next government of British Columbia after edging ahead in a final tally of ballots on Monday, more than a week after the October 19 vote took place. The NDP was leading or elected in 47 seats, just enough to form a majority government in Canada's westernmost province, while John Brustad's Conservative Party of British Columbia had 44 seats and the BC Green Party won 2. Abbey met on Monday with British Columbia's Lieutenant Governor Janet Austin, who asked him to form the next government. The Premier said in a statement, British Columbia has elected the NDP team to lead the province for a 3rd time, following a re-election that secured its 4th term in power. The NDP won despite rising concerns about crime, public safety, and the government's drug policy. The province, home to Canada's liquefied natural gas export industry, is seen as a climate policy leader. The NDP's victory ensures provincial climate measures, including its clean fuel standard, and means no LNG terminals must reduce zero carbon emissions by 2030. Abbey has promised to scrap the province's carbon tax if the federal government drops it. You're watching the international news on Atlantic Television Network. Still ahead, former trade minister arrested over imports graft case. We'll be back after this break. Do stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching the broadcast of the International News on Atlantic Television Network. Remember, we are open for advert placements, news and events coverage, personality, society and political interviews, products, service promotion and commercials. You can connect with us on all our ATN socials, Facebook and YouTube at Atlantic Television Network, Instagram and TikTok at Atlantic TV Network 1, Twitter at Atlantic TV Net. Watch us live on our website www.atlanticnetwork.tv. And the followings. Mexican Supreme Court Justice Alfredo Gutierrez will resign from the court at the end of August 2025. He said in a letter on Tuesday, the first of several resignations expected following a controversial judicial reform. The move further heightens tensions between Mexico's Supreme Court and the governing ruling bloc, increasing the risks of a constitutional crisis as Congress and the presidency remain at loggerheads with the judiciary over the reform. Mexico is set to choose new Supreme Court justices in an election in June as part of the reform which overhauls the judiciary to appoint judges by popular vote. Current justices wishing not to participate in the election are required to announce their resignations by Friday, a source from the court told newsmen. 8 of the court's 11 justices are rumored to announce their resignation on Tuesday, Senate President Gerardo Fernandez Noronha said in a press conference. The 11-member Supreme Court, which will see its number reduced to 9 as part of the reform, is considering a challenge over the reform's constitutionality. Only 3 of the current justices have publicly backed the reform. It is necessary to underscore that this resignation does not imply an implicit acceptance of the reform's constitutionality. Gutierrez, who has been a justice since 2012, said in his resignation. The constitutional reform proposed by former President Andrés Manuel López Obrador and passed last month by Congress with overwhelming support by ruling party Morena paves the way for the popular election of more than 6,500 judges, magistrates and ministers, including Mexico's Supreme Court. Brazilian armed forces will be used to reinforce security during the meeting of the group of 20 leading economies in Rio de Janeiro next month, the city's state secretary for security said on Tuesday. Under Brazil's law, the country's president has the power to deploy the military temporarily to a specific region to patrol streets as police in cases where the usual security forces are not enough to handle the situation. The measure, known as Guarantee of Law and other GLO, has been used before to reinforce security during the global events Brazil has hosted, such as the 2014 World Cup, the 2016 Rio de Janeiro Olympics, and the 2012 United Nations Summit, Rio 20. This law will certainly be used, Rio de Janeiro State Secretary for Security Victor Santos told journalists on Tuesday. When asked about the G20 heads of the government's meeting, the host country is responsible for ensuring the safety of those who come, he added. Leaders, including U.S. President Joe Biden and China's Xi Jinping, confirmed they will be in Rio de Janeiro for the G20 summit, which will take place November 18th to 19th. According to Santos, the armed forces would be deployed in the city of Rio de Janeiro, not the whole state. Neither Brazil's presidential office nor the defense ministry immediately responded to requests for comments on the remarks by Rio de Janeiro's secretary. China implied on Wednesday that if U.S. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump won the November 5th election, he could discard Taiwan, saying the United States has always pursued an America First policy. Trump, neck and neck in the polls with Vice President Kamala Harris, has made comments on the campaign trail that Chinese claimed Taiwan should pay to be protected and also accused the islands of stealing American semiconductor business. When asked about Trump's remarks this month vowing to impose additional massive tariffs on China if it were to go into Taiwan, as well as about Taiwan having to pay for protection, a spokesperson for China's Taiwan Affairs Office said Taiwan's people had a clear understanding of U.S. policy. Taiwan's President Zhu Fengmilan has defended the U.S.'s America First policy, stating that Taiwan could become a pawn for to the U.S. rather, a tactic similar to the game Go. The U.S. is legally obliged to provide Taiwan with defense measures, even without diplomatic ties. Trump has repeatedly accused Taiwan of stealing U.S. cheap business and needing to pay for protection. Taiwan's Economy Minister Koo Jin-hyo has not commented on the U.S. election campaign. The U.S. has continued arms sales to Taiwan, including a $2 billion missile system package. Australia said it was boosting its missile defense capability amid significant concerns about China's test of an ICBM in the South Pacific and will bolster weapons stockpiles and exports to security partners as the region enters a new missile age. Minister for Defense Industry Pat Conroy said in a speech on Wednesday that Australia was increasing its missile defense and long-range strike capability and would cooperate with security partners, the United States, Japan and South Korea, to contribute to regional stability. Strategic competition between the United States and China is a primary feature of Australia's security environment, he told the National Press Club in Canberra. China test-fired an intercontinental ballistic missile in September that traveled over 11,000 kilometers to land in the Pacific Ocean to Australia's northeast. Earlier this month, Australia announced a $7 billion Australian deal with the United States to acquire SM-23C and Raytheon SM-6 long-range missiles for its Navy. Australia has previously said it would spend $74 billion Australian on missile acquisition and missile defense over the next decade, including $21 billion Australian to fund the Australian Guided Weapons and Explosive Ordnance Enterprise, a new domestic manufacturing capability. North Korea has moved into place a launcher ready for an intercontinental ballistic missile ICBM and may decide to set it off around the time of the U.S. presidential election, South Korean lawmakers said, citing military intelligence. The North may seek to highlight its strategic weapons developments by attempting to launch a long-range missile or conduct its 7th nuclear test around the time of the November 5th election, South Korean officials have said. On Wednesday, an MP, Lee Sung-kyung, said a mobile launcher has been deployed at a location for a possible test of the ICBM and its atmospheric re-entry of a missile warhead, potentially around the time of the November 5th election. Lee was briefing reporters after a closed-door parliamentary hearing with Defense Intelligence Agency DIA officials. Another MP, Park Sung-won, said the DIA did not believe a missile had yet been loaded on the launcher, although it might also have been transported to the site. North Korea has performed a series of ICBM test launches at a sharply steep trajectory to let the projectiles drop within much shorter distances relative to the design range, partly for safety and to avoid the political fallout of sending a missile far into the Pacific. Malaysian courts ruled on Wednesday jailed former Prime Minister Najib Razak will have to defend himself against more abuse of power and money laundering charges in another trial over the multi-billion-dollar scandal at State Fund, one multi-billion-dollar fund. Najib faces 4 charges of abuse of power and 21 charges of money laundering for allegedly receiving 2.3 billion ringgit from one Malaysian development Berhad. He has pleaded not guilty. If convicted, Najib faces up to 20 years in prison and fines up to 5 times the amount of funds involved in the offense. Najib, 71 years old, was sentenced to 12 years in prison in 2022 after being found guilty of grafts in a separate 1 MDB-linked cases. The sentence was later halved by a pardons board chaired by Malaysia's kings, with Najib set to be released in August 2028. Malaysian and U.S. investigators say at least $4.5 billion was allegedly misappropriated from 1MDP, a state fund founded by Najib in 2009, I beg your pardon, while he was premier. The Kuala Lumpur High Court ruled on Wednesday that prosecutors had established a case against Najib on 25 charges. Judge Colin Lawrence Sequeira said the charges filed against Najib were valid and correct in law and found all prosecution witnesses to be credible. Prosecutors have called on 50 witnesses to give evidence, including former Central Bank Governor Zeti Akhtar Aziz, media reported. Taiwan expects Super Typhoon Kungray to make landfall on Thursday along its sparsely populated east coast, issuing a warning on Wednesday ahead of the powerful storm that will bring heavy rain and strong winds across a swath of the island. Packing gusts of nearly 300 km per hour, the storm has strengthened into a super typhoon and is expected to further intensify before hitting Taitung County, according to U.S. Navy's Joint Typhoon Warning Center. The storm is then forecast to cross Taiwan's south, enter the Taiwan Strait and head towards China, Taiwan's Central Weather Administration said, which labeled the storm a strong typhoon, the most powerful storm level for Taiwan. Up to 1.2 meters of rainfall is expected in mountainous eastern Taiwan, and destructive winds are likely to hit coastal areas on Thursday, according to the administration. Taiwan President Lai Ching-te urged people to stay away from the mountains in Coast Taiwan's defense ministry said it had put about 36,000 troops on standby across the island. Central Weather Administration forecaster Stang Chang said it was relatively rare for a strong typhoon to directly hit Taiwan this late in the year, pointing to the still favorable environment for typhoons, including warmer sea temperatures in the Pacific later than normal, cold fronts from the north. Moldova's pro-Western President Mai Sandu faces an uphill struggle to win a second term in an election runoff on Sunday, in which her defeat could allow Moscow to gain more influence in a diplomatic background between Russia and European Union. Sandu, a 52-year-old former World Bank advisor, popular in the West, has accelerated the southeastern European nation's push to leave Moscow's orbit, and in June began the long process of EU accession talks as the war in Ukraine reached to the east. The vote comes after Saturday's parliamentary election in Georgia, another ex-Soviet country trying to join the EU, where a ruling party seen by many in the West as increasingly pro-Russian claimed victory. It will be an uphill struggle for Sandu with internal grievances, but also external pressure and meddling, said Orsia Lusevi, Deputy Director of Chatham House Russia and Eurasia Program. She faces Alexander Stonoglo, an ex-prosecutor general backed by the traditionally pro-Russian Socialist Party, who says that as president, he would back EU integration as well as develop ties with Russia in the national interest. Last Sunday's presidential debate, Sandu, whose term was seen in a sharp deterioration of ties with Moscow, said Sontiangulu was a Trojan horse candidate for outside interests bent on seizing control of Moldova. The first round of the elections and a referendum held in parallel to gauge the nation's EU aspirations on October 20 were marred by what officials said was a vast vote-buying scheme run by a fugitive, Russian-backed oligarch Lan Shaw. Sandu has said the scheme sought to pay off 300,000 voters, more than 10% of the population, to vote in a particular way. Moscow has denied any role, while Shaw denies any wrongdoing. Though she said the meddling affected the results, Sandu won the referendum by a close margin, buoyed by votes from the largely pro-European diaspora living abroad. She won 42% at the first round versus Technoglo's 26%. Ruslan Rakov, a Ukrainian political expert in Moldova and managing partner at the PGR Consulting Group LLC, said the numbers looked staggered against Sandu going into the runoff. For some Georgians who supported the ruling Georgian Dream Party in Saturday's disputed parliamentary election, the aspiration to go west towards the European Union had to be balanced by the brutal reality of the need to keep the peace with Russia. The opposition and foreign observers had cast the election as a watershed moment that will decide if Georgia moves closer to Europe or leans back towards Russia amid the war in Ukraine. The ruling party, which is seen as loyal to its billionaire founder Bidzina Ivanishvili, says it wants to one day join the EU, but that it must also avoid confrontation with President Vladimir Putin's Russia that could leave the South Caucasus Republic devastated like Ukraine. We've had peace this 12 years in Georgia, said Sergio, a resident of the capital Tbilisi, who has voted for Georgian Dream in every election since the party rose to power in 2012. Georgian Dream clinched 54% of the vote on Saturday. The Electoral Commission said while opposition parties and the president claimed the election had been stolen and West called for investigations into reports of voting irregularities. Observer groups, including the 57-nation Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, said alleged violations including ballot stuffing, bribery, voter intimidation and violence could have affected the election's outcome. The EU and the United States say there was not a level playing field, but stopped short of saying the results were stolen by Georgian Dream. Russia accuses the West of meddling beyond the rhetoric, though the results poses a challenge to Tbilisi's ambitions to join the European Union, which polls show the overwhelming majority of Georgian support. Brussels has effectively frozen Georgia's EU accession application over concerns of democratic backsliding under Georgian Dream and what it casts at it. Pro-Russian rhetoric, Georgian Dream bakers say that while they want to join Europe, they don't want to sacrifice Georgia's traditional values of family and charge. Teenager accused of murdering 3 young girls in a knife attack in northern England in July has been further charged with a terrorism offense and the production of deadly poison ricin. Police and prosecutors said on Tuesday. Axel Rudakubana, 18 years old, is accused of killing the girls aged between 6 and 9 at a Taylor Swift dance event in Southport. Murders which shocked Britain and provoked days of rioting. Police say the incident was still not being treated as terrorist-related, but said after searches of his home that Rudakubana had now been charged with the production of the lethal biological toxin ricin and the possession of an Al-Qaeda training manual. Rudakubana was charged in August but has not yet entered a plea to 3 counts of murder and 10 counts of attempted murder. He will appear at London's Westminster's Magistrates Court on Wednesday over the 2 new offences. Large disturbances broke out in Southport after false reports spread on social media that the suspected killer was a radical Islamist migrant. The disturbances spread across Britain with attacks on mosques and hotels housing asylum seekers. At the time, police sought to quash the rumors which caused the trouble to erupt, saying the suspect had been born in Britain and there was no terrorism link. Prime Minister Keir Starmer blamed the riots and far-right thuggery. Kennedy rejected online speculation that the police were trying to keep things from the public. For a matter to be declared a terrorist incident, she added, motivation would need to be established. We would strongly advise caution against anyone speculating as to motivation in this case. Starmer's office said it was important that the Police and Crown Prosecution Service, CPS, were allowed to do their jobs and establish the fact. 9 people were injured, several apartments set ablaze, and a kindergarten was damaged in Russia's 19th attack on the Ukrainian capital this month. Officials in Kyiv said on Wednesday, Ukraine's Air Force said Russia launched 62 drones overnight, but air defense units destroyed 33 of them over Kyiv and other regions, although 25 were unaccounted for. 19 air attacks on Kyiv in October. Serhiy Popko, the head of Kyiv's military administration, said on Telegram messaging app. Overnight, Russian drones again flew over the capital, falling debris from a destroyed drone sparked a fire in the multi-story apartments building in Kyiv's western district of Slomiansky and injured at least 9 people, including an 11-year-old girl. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said on Telegram. All of them were treated by medics on the spot. Klitschko said 19 people were evacuated from the building, said the city's military administration, which also posted photographs of a building with blown-out windows and demanded fact that it's described as a kindergarten in Slomiansky. Witnesses at the scene saw firefighters scrambling to douse flames at flats in an apartment building with several windows blown out. Air raid alerts sounded across Kyiv, the surrounding region, and nearly the whole eastern half of Ukraine for more than 2 hours overnight. And that's the package on the international news for today. Before we go, let's take a look at the headlines again. Several Egyptian migrants fear death off Libya coast. Wisconsin courts decline Kennedy's ballot's withdrawal. We told you that senators decry chemical smuggling. You also heard that former trade minister arrested over imports graft case. We also told you that Moldova heads for presidential runoff and 9 injured in Russia's air attack on Kyiv. Many thanks for watching. I am Victor Peter. Remember, we are open for adverts placements, news and events coverage, personality, society and political interviews, products, service promotion and commercials. You can connect with us on all our ATN socials, Facebook and YouTube at Atlantic Television Network, Instagram and TikTok at Atlantic TV Network 1, Twitter at Atlantic TV Net. Watch us live on our website, www.atlanticnetwork.tv, and the followings. Peace and unity are the pathways to progress. Business news comes up next. To stay with us.